The first man who told me he remembered dying was named Rory. I met him in the South Blocks, in a housing tower that had never been washed clean, only painted over. The tower sat beside a local jump kiosk, a squat concrete box with a line of workers curling around it. Men in stained coveralls shifted from foot to foot, lunch slings over their shoulders, eyes on the departure timer above the door. Commuting by ground meant losing half a day. Nobody did that if they could help it. I stepped off the tram, straightened my jacket so the Ethics Bureau badge sat where people could see it, and crossed the plaza. One of the building wardens waited at the entrance, boots wide, hand wrapped around a stun baton like he needed the reassurance. "Caseworker Bell," he said. "That is me." He gave the queue a quick glance, as if he hoped the whole issue had just walked away on its own. "Rory Boyd, floor 20, unit 10. Been banging on the walls since dawn." The warden grunted. "Says the grid killed him yesterday and sent back the wrong man." That line still bothers me, even now. At the time, I treated it as routine. "Any weapons?" I asked. "Only thing he has been attacking is his wall node. Neighbors said he tried to pry it out with a table leg." The warden jerked his head at the stairwell. "Lift is out again. I will take you up." We climbed. The stairwell smelled like damp concrete and old oil, but I tried to keep my breathing steady. The Ethics Bureau liked their caseworkers to look unflappable, like priests of transit. If we looked calm, people believed the grid was calm. On floor 20, the corridor was already crowded. 2 more wardens had posted themselves near a door half covered in warning tape. The tape was recent. The door itself had fresh dents around the lock. One of the wardens nodded at me. "He tried to rush the kiosk this morning, screaming that it was an execution box. We dragged him back before he could scare the whole shift." "Any family inside with him?" I asked. "Lives alone. Brother died in a plant fire last year." The warden's mouth twisted. "You want us in there with you?" "If he gets physical, you come in." I touched the small tranquilizer patch in my pocket, ran through the standard script in my head one more time. Continuity distress. Reassure. Reference Bureau guidelines about subjective experience of transit. Avoid words like dead, killed, burned. Until then, let me try the conversation. I knocked. "Rory, my name is Walter Bell. I work with the Transit Ethics Bureau. Your wardens asked me to visit." For a while, there was only the distant hiss from the kiosk downstairs as each new group went through. I thought he might be ignoring me. Then the lock scraped. The door opened a hand's width on a chain. Rory's eye appeared in the gap, ringed in red. He had the look of someone who had not slept all night and would hit anything that tried to send him to bed. "Did they send a priest?" he asked. "Or an executioner?" I could feel the wardens behind me straighten. "I do not decide who lives or dies," I said. "I talk to people who had a rough time in transit. That is all. May I come in?" He stared at me, breathing raggedly. His gaze dropped to my badge, then back up. At last the door shut, the chain rattled, and it opened wider. His unit looked as if he had flipped it over and shaken it. Cushions shoved against the balcony door. A chair broken in half near the wall node, which sat open like a chest wound, wires hanging. The node controlled his commute schedule. Most people forgot it existed after the installers left. "You broke your connection," I said. "I tore out the anchor." He paced away from me, bare feet slapping the floor. "They cannot pull me into that thing again if they cannot find me." "Sit, please." I stayed close to the doorway, hands visible. "I just want to hear what happened yesterday." "They already know what happened." He jabbed a finger toward the ceiling, toward where the kiosk waited outside. "The grid killed me. I went in for work. I arrived in the plant lockers like always, and in between I died. I remember it." Continuity distress cases almost always talked about feelings. Feeling wrong, feeling detached, feeling like someone else. Rory was being specific. That was new. "Tell me what you remember." He stopped pacing. For a moment the room settled. Then he spoke in a quick, flat rhythm like a man reciting an accident report. "I stepped into the pod. Door closed. Count went down. I felt the charge in my teeth, the same as always. Then the floor opened under me. I dropped. There was fire under the pod. Not a little spark. A whole channel of it. I watched my own legs fall toward it. I tried to move and could not. I felt my skin crack. I tried to scream and nothing came out. Then I was on my knees in the arrival booth, whole again. He lifted his forearms. The skin there was unmarked, but he stared at it, as if he could see something I could not. "You understand," he said. "I remember burning, every moment of it. I did not forget when I arrived. That means something. That means I did not arrive." I had heard variations of that fear before. Men who dreamed they came out wrong. Men who woke up convinced their wives had been replaced. Transit stripped away a thin layer of control, and people hated that. Our job was to catch them before they did something stupid with the fear. Still. The details snagged at me. The floor opening. Fire. "Have you ever worked in heavy industry?" I asked. "Seen a smelter? A furnace? Anything like that?" "My brother did," he said. "He died in one. That is not what this is, and you know it." He stormed across the room and slammed both palms into the patched wall. "The grid is lying to us. They tell us we ride the beam, body and mind. But I saw my own body fall away. I felt myself tear. If that is a hallucination, fix it. Cut that piece out of me. If it is real, then you are here to convince me to keep walking into a fire." He was breathing hard now, shoulders hunched. I took one step closer, hands still down. "Rory, what you are describing is a known phenomenon. Sometimes the brain misfires when the grid charges. It grabs familiar images. Your brother's accident, a furnace. The mind fills the gap between departure and arrival with whatever it can understand." His hands curled into fists. "So you are saying it is all in my head?" "I'm saying the grid does not kill people," I said, automatic. I had said that line so many times it moved on its own. The continuity of self is maintained across the jump. That has been tested again and again. He looked at me as if I were the worst liar he had ever met. The wardens shifted outside, boots scraping the hall. Rory's gaze flicked toward the door, toward the balcony, toward the gutted node on the wall. I saw the decision form in his stance before he moved. He bolted for the balcony. I lunged. The nearest warden crashed in through the door behind me, shoulder first. We slammed into Rory as he clawed at the barricade of cushions. His elbow drove into my ribs hard enough to blur my vision. He kicked backward, catching the warden in the knee. Furniture skidded. For a second his fingers hooked the balcony handle. "Let me go!" he shouted. "Better the street than the fire." The second warden hit him low. They went down in a tangle. I staggered, caught my balance, and grabbed his wrist before he could throw another swing. He fought like a man who believed there was only one way out of the room. "Enough!" the first warden snapped. A paramedic in grey coveralls called up while we climbed the stairs, stepped through the doorway with a sedative patch already primed on his glove. The wardens pinned Rory against the floor. The paramedic slapped the patch onto the side of his neck. Rory thrashed once, then his muscles turned slack. His eyes stayed on me as the drug took hold. "You were in the fire too," he whispered. "You just cannot remember it." That landed somewhere I did not want to look. They strapped him to a gurney and wheeled him out past the neighbours who pretended they were not watching. I stood in the doorway, hand on the frame, ribs aching, and filled out the report on my slate. Subject, Rory Boyd. Continuity distress after standard workplace commute. Describes intrusive imagery of bodily destruction during transit. Family history, industrial accident trauma. Recommendation, intensive neural hygiene and supervised exposure to low-grade jumps before return to work. The form did not have a box for "he might be right." I signed where the system told me to sign. Later, riding back to the bureau, I told myself I had done my job. I had prevented a man from throwing himself off a balcony. I had put him into the care of professionals. The grid was safe. The glitches were in people, not in the machine. I told myself that, until I believed it enough to sleep. It held for a while. Years later, Rory still sat at the back of my head when I opened the case queue that morning. The office was a narrow rectangle on level 8 of the Ethics Bureau tower. Rows of desks, panel walls, overhead panels humming just enough to fill the silence with a thin, mechanical breath. Caseworkers hunched over their terminals, faces bleached by the light of open files. I slid into my station, set my mug down on the worn ring it had made over the years, and brought up the overnight flags. Most mornings it was the usual trickle. Men who woke after a jump convinced their hands were the wrong size. Workers afraid they were losing time. Rare complaints about arrival clothing not matching departure clothing. All of it fed into our metrics. That morning, a single line of red text sat at the top of the screen. Cluster flag, Eastwell hub, multiple continuity reports, keyword match, fire. I tapped it. 3 case summaries opened side by side, different names, different jobs, same core description. I stepped into the pod. I remember falling. I remember fire. My fingers tightened around the mug without thinking. Somewhere in the building, a maintenance cart rattled by, the sound climbing through the floor. Bad news, Bell? Director Bran leaned on the divider of my cubicle, heavy hand flattening the thin wall. Bran ran the metropolitan arm of the Bureau, which meant he signed off on what did and did not count as a systemic problem. He had a thick beard that went to grey in uneven streaks, and eyes that always seemed to be trying to decide whether you were a minor nuisance or a threat. Eastwell, I said. Cluster of continuity reports. 3 in one morning, same keyword, same line. That is high. Bran scanned the summaries over my shoulder. 3 men and some dramatic language, he said. The grid moved 250,000 commuters yesterday. You know the ratios. 3 with the same image, I said. Fire under the pod. He watched me a moment. You are thinking of that worker from the South Blocks, he said. The one who tried to dive off his balcony. I did not ask how he remembered. He read everything. I'm thinking that Eastwell is already on the edge. You have seen the footage. Lines backed out into the street every morning. If word gets around that people are remembering dying in those pods, which they are not, he cut in. They are remembering dreams, or old trauma, or rumors they heard off some basement stream, dressed up as experience. The grid does not kill people. The official line again. It always sounded more solid coming from him. Then we should prove it, I said. He studied me, weighing something, then nodded once. Take the call. Talk to the complainants. Talk to the hub manager. Walk the public through this before it grows teeth. He hesitated, then added, and if the hub wants a show of confidence, you ride their line. Eastwell takes the Bureau's own continuity man through the same pods the complainers used. We broadcast it on local feeds. People see you step in and step out without losing your mind. We close the story. Ride the line, I repeated. You do believe the grid is safe, do you not, Bell? He looked almost amused. Or have you been signing off on travel you consider murder? There it was, the hook he always had ready. Men like me hated to think of ourselves as executioners. The grid is safe, I said. I will go. Good. Bran clapped the divider and pushed away. Take an early tram. The hub manager will be twitchy enough already. I want your report by tonight. I grabbed my jacket and slate and headed for the lift before I could start turning the decision over in my head. The tram to Eastwell ran along one of the old ground spines, weaving between warehouses and the tall glass spire of the hub itself. From a distance, the hub looked like a bundle of launch tubes wrapped with transit bridges. As we drew closer, individual details came into focus. The queues snaking across the plaza, the columns of security scanners at each entrance, the arrival towers venting heat from their upper levels. I stepped off with the morning crowd. Men in work boots and pressed shirts filed toward the departure gates, badges already in hand. Above them, the hub's public announcement boards rolled through soothing slogans about efficiency and safety. A security officer in black stood at the base of the main stair, scanning for my badge. When he spotted me, he waved me through the side gate and into a quieter hallway. "Manager Gloom is waiting in operations," the officer said. "He is not pleased." "Hub managers never are," I said. We passed through a series of checkpoints, doors that opened only after the officer tapped his wristband against a reader. Cameras watching every angle. The air grew warmer as we moved inward. Operations sat behind a thick glass wall overlooking the main departure hall. From there, you could watch the tide of commuters move through the pods. Gloom stood in front of the glass with a slate in hand, tapping furiously. "Bell," he said, "they send the priests to me now." "I am not a priest. I write reports and talk people down. I saw the cluster flag. I need to interview the complainants, inspect the pods they used, and review any anomalies from your side. You and half the city." Gloom jabbed a thumb at the glass. "Someone in comms leaked the keyword, fire. Now every man who has ever driven past a refinery thinks he will fall into it." "Have you seen their statements?" I asked. I glanced. He shrugged. "Same phrases, same imagery. Could be some underground feed stirring them up." "That is what I am here to rule out," I said. "If it is mass suggestion, I will write that. If it is something in your pods, I will find it." Gloom snorted. "Nothing wrong with my pods. They passed transit authority inspection last month. No misalignments, no misfires, no missed wipes." He flicked his slate and spun it so I could see a list of diagnostic codes. "Eastwell is not the problem. People are." "Then letting me look will only help you," I said. "Start with the complainants. Where are they?" He grimaced. "Security pulled them aside after arrival. We set them up in quiet rooms like you told us after that last incident. They are waiting." "I will talk to them one by one," I said. "After that, I want to walk the line. Public gate to departure. Pads themselves. Any access you have to sublevels." Gloom stiffened at that. "What do sublevels have to do with continuity distress? You run a heat reclamation system down there, do you not?" I nodded toward a thick door on the far side of operations. A security guard stood planted in front of it, arms folded. The sign above read, "Thermal Recycling, Authorized Personnel Only." "It sits directly under the departure pads." "Waste heat recovery," he said. "It keeps the upper levels from cooking and recoups the massive energy cost of the incinerators. It is also none of your concern." "I am not here to audit your energy contracts," I said. "But if commuters are describing fire under their feet, I need to know what sits under their feet, even if it is just a hot pipe and a guilty imagination." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. The guard at the thermal door never moved, eyes straight ahead. "Talk to your men upstairs first," Gloom said. "If you still think my heaters are speaking to them, we will revisit the argument." Which meant he would stall until Bran told me to back off. Fine, one thing at a time. The three complainants sat in small interview rooms, branching off a side corridor. Standard design. A table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, a dispenser in the corner with paper cups and lukewarm water. Each man had a different face, different clothes, different job. A warehouse foreman, a junior accountant, a maintenance worker for the tram lines. The foreman described stepping into the pod, feeling the charge, then dropping into a channel of fire. The accountant said his shoes had melted before his eyes and then they had not. The maintenance worker shook as he talked about seeing his own hair burn away. Different lives, same image. I asked the usual questions. Prior trauma, fear of transit, exposure to conspiracy feeds. The foreman admitted he watched 1 or 2 underground channels when he was drunk, but nothing about the grid. The others denied it. None of them had met before. Every time one of them said the word fire, Rory stood a little closer in my mind. I finished the last interview and stepped back into the operations hall. Gloom was watching the departure floor through the glass. "Well?" he asked. "They are not rehearsing," I said. "Either they caught the same rumor in different places and built it into a shared hallucination, or something is bleeding through the wipes." You know how tight the amnesia fields are, he said. Transit Authority tunes them every month. There is no bleed. Then the rumor theory is all we have, and it is a bad one. The wording matches too closely, and if this does get out, you will have more than 3 men refusing to step into your pods. He rubbed his temples. What do you want from me? Access to the pods they used, I said, and a demonstration. You cannot possibly think— You already said your pods are not the problem, I reminded him. Let me ride the same line, publicly. You have cameras on the public gates, correct? Of course. Then you broadcast the Bureau's continuity caseworker stepping into a pod and stepping out on the other side, calm and whole. People see that, they breathe easier. Meanwhile, I get to experience the same transit those men did. Gloom stared at me as if he wanted to find a polite way to refuse and could not. You are serious? Yes. He spat a curse under his breath. Fine. You want to be a martyr, be my guest. We will route you through Pad Group A, same line they used. I can get local feeds to carry the jump in an hour. Make it sooner, I said. The longer we wait, the more time rumor has to grow. He snapped at a nearby tech, a thin man at a console. You heard the Bureau. Prep a jump for caseworker Bell. Group A, public gate, full documentation, and scrub the pods twice. The tech glanced at me, then at Gloom. Is that wise? Do it, Gloom said. The tech nodded and started tapping. I stepped away from the glass. Down in the main hall, people were still filing into the pods, scanning badges, vanishing behind sliding doors. The system moved them like pieces on a board. Efficient. Clean. The truth is, I had not ridden the public grid in years. Bureau staff had access to secured lines with shorter waits and better monitoring. I did not avoid the public pods out of fear. It just had not come up. I told myself that again while I waited. They set up the demonstration at Gate 12, mid-level. By the time I reached it, a small crowd had gathered behind a security cordon. Some were commuters delayed from their usual path, watching to see what the fuss was about. Others had picked up the news from local feeds and come to see whether the Ethics Bureau trusted the grid as much as they told everyone else to. A tripod camera stood opposite the pod. Another, mounted near the arrival gate across the city, showed up as a small window on a display beside the door. Gloom had insisted on the split-screen feed. In one half, the departure pod at Eastwell. In the other, the arrival booth at a central hub, empty and waiting. Gloom met me at the edge of the cordon. The line is clear, he said. No anomalies in the last hour. We put the 3 complainants pod in the middle of the group, so we are not isolating it. You jump from this one, you come out over there with the same cleaners and guards anyone else sees. Simple. His hand shook slightly as he gestured towards the pod. If there is something wrong, I said, this will help us find it. And if there is not, you are about to scare a lot of people over nothing. Or reassure them, I said. He did not answer. Security stepped aside. The crowd quieted in that way groups do when they realize something personal is about to happen on a public stage. I forced my shoulders to unlock and walked toward the pod. It looked like any other departure unit in any other hub. An oval door with a small inspection window. A reader panel for badges and destination codes. The Transit Authority crest stamped above the frame. I tapped my badge against the reader. The panel glowed a steady green. Caseworker Walter Bell, the system announced. Destination Central Transit Hub, Arrival Gate 5. The door slid aside. Inside, the pod had room for one man and his doubts. A round floor plate, padded walls, a curved handrail at chest height, small vents along the ceiling for air and for the faint mist used during the neural hygiene wipe. I stepped in. The door closed behind me. There is a moment in every jump when you are alone with the choice you already made. The system grinds up to full. The charge builds. Somewhere in the machinery, your body is about to become numbers to be sent elsewhere. People have gotten used to that thought. They spout jokes about it in bars. They mock the old superstitions. Rory's last words pushed in. You were in the fire too, you just cannot remember it. Begin transit, I said. The pod acknowledged me with a low tone. The handrail under my fingers warmed. My teeth prickled as the field built around me. Vision warped at the edges, colours smearing. The mist crept down from the vents, cool on my skin, carrying the reassuring promise that whatever happened in the next breath, I would not remember the worst of it. I had always thought that part was about motion sickness. The floor dropped away, not a gentle illusion of falling. A physical lurch, metal plate gone, weight vanishing under my feet. For a heartbeat there was only empty space and a single impossible flash of perspective. I was not in the pod anymore. I was looking up at it. From below, the pod was a round mouth in the ceiling of a narrow shaft. My own body hung above me, upright, knees loose, head tilted slightly back. The expression on my face was blank, as if someone had pulled me out of myself and forgotten to put me back. Then gravity took me. The body that wore my face tipped forward and dropped toward me, toward the base of the shaft, where a long channel ran, filled end to end with roaring orange heat. The light from it hit my falling body, carving out each detail, shirt, badge, hands spread slightly, as if reaching for a rail that no longer existed. I felt the heat on my skin before I touched it. The hair on my arms stiffened, then curled. The air itself seemed to claw at me. My right hand reached out instinctively, bracing for impact against the invisible floor that was no longer there. Flames reached up instead. They wrapped that hand, swallowed it, ate through flesh faster than I could form a thought. For an instant my skin went white and tight, then split open like paper held to a burner. I tried to scream. The world tore. I was standing in the arrival booth at Central Transit Hub. The handrail under my palm was cool. The floor was solid. The door in front of me slid open in an arc. For a second I could not move. The memory of my hand burning screamed inside me, while the rest of me stood whole and unharmed. Alarms wailed. A pair of transit medics rushed toward the pod, one with a scanner, the other with a sedative injector. "Stay where you are," one of them said. "We picked up neural interference on your jump." I looked down at my right hand. The skin was unbroken. No blisters, no blackened patches. Just my fingers. But my mind remembered every moment of them burning. I did not argue when the medics guided me to a bench beside the arrival gate. I barely registered the curious glances of other commuters, the way they gave the pod a wider berth as if something might leak from it. "You experienced sensory bleed," one medic said, while the other scanned my head. "Sometimes the amnesia wash does not sync perfectly, especially under broadcast conditions. You probably got a flash of the calibration imagery." Calibration imagery. Flames under the pod, bodies falling. "Is that normal?" I asked. "It happens," he said. "That is why we run the wash again afterward." He pressed the injector under my jaw before I could answer. The drug hit like a wave of ice under my skin. My thoughts started to smear at the edges. I clung to one thing, one image, my right hand dropping into the channel, skin stretching, then splitting. The world slid sideways. When I came back to myself, I was lying on a cot in a bureau clinic room. Someone had draped a blanket over me. My jacket hung on a hook near the door. Director Brand sat in the corner chair watching. "How much do you remember?" he asked. The room swayed slightly. I pushed myself upright. "I remember stepping into the pod," I said slowly. "The charge building. The mist. That is it." He held my gaze a moment longer, searching for cracks. "No fire?" he asked. "No falling?" I knew the correct answer. The answer that kept my job and my access and my chance to find out what in that shaft had really happened. "No," I said. "Just the usual blank patch between here and there." Bran nodded, satisfied. He leaned back, chair creaking. "Good. Operations reported a transient glitch in the hygiene field. They cleared it already. Your little stunt gave Gloom palpitations, but the feed looks solid." The city watched you ride the line without losing your mind. That should calm things down. Calm. That word did not fit the image carved into me. Do the complainants know we ran this? I asked. We will tell them. Along with the conclusion. Cluster of subjective distress, no systemic threat. The grid remains safe. He pushed himself to his feet. I want your written report by morning. Short and clear. This does not need more fuel. Understood? Understood. He left. The door clicked shut. The room settled into a soft mechanical background noise. Somewhere beyond the walls, cots creaked, vents breathed, machines reported on pulses and brainwaves. I lifted my right hand. There were no marks, no scars, no sign of what I had seen. I closed my fist and opened it again, slow. I could have let it go. I could have told myself it was a hallucination, a glitch image, a dream stirred up by Rory's old case and 3 frightened men at Eastwell. I could have signed the report, accepted the pay, ridden the private lines until I retired. Instead, I sat there on that cot and stared at my unburned hand. The grid, I thought, does not kill people, but the line sounded wrong in my own head. A week after the broadcast jump, I tried to behave like nothing had changed. I went back to the office. I cleared minor cases. I sat in meetings where other people talked about public confidence curves while I thought about my right hand in the fire. Whenever I caught myself thinking about the shaft beneath the pod, I pushed it down the same way I had pushed down Rory. That is what the job trained you to do. You filed fear as an entry, stamped it with the right language, and sent it somewhere you did not have to see. It kept working until I pulled my own jump log. I did it late, after hours, when most of the cubicles on level 8 had gone dark, and the night shift had taken over only a thin strip of desks by the windows. I keyed in my badge, threaded through the bureau's internal menu tree, and opened the transit record for my demonstration run. The top layer looked clean. Departure, Eastwell Hub, Gate 12. Arrival, Central Gate 5. Hygiene wash applied on both ends, all fields within tolerance. There was a small icon tucked at the margin, a buried alert. I tapped it. A second sheet of entries unfolded, internal notes from other departments. One line jumped at me. Thermal load spike, Eastwell substrate channel A, timestamp match CAD E, M, substrate channel. That was the grid's term for the underfloor zones, where waste from transit was broken down and fed into the power grid. Most people never thought about them. I rarely had. Underneath, there was a signed clearance. Anomaly acknowledged, routing suppressed from public log, cause listed as calibration test. The signature belonged to Thermal Reclamation, Eastwell Division. The name attached to it was Ryan Bell. I sat back in my chair. My brother had signed off on the same jump that burned my mind. I stared at his name until the screen blurred. Part of me wanted to hit delete, close the log, and pretend I had never seen it. Another part had already reached for my pocket. I called him. The icon blinked twice before he picked up. Ryan's face filled the corner of my display, sweat shining on his forehead, a smear of black on one cheek. Behind him, pipes and thick cables cut across a low ceiling. Walter, to what do I owe the honour? His voice had the same dry edge it always carried when I called from work. I am looking at a thermal alert from Eastwell. Substrate channel A. It is tagged to my demonstration jump. He swore and wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist, leaving a darker streak. Thought that might come back, he said. You should not have gone through their pods on camera. Too late for that, I said. Why did your channel spike when I jumped? Because something heavy dropped into it from above. Look, I am at a client plant now. This line is not secure. Come see me in person. Where? The Eastwell Underworks. Use the service entrance off the tram spur. I will have someone meet you, and wear something that can survive a stain. He cut the call. I sat a moment longer, watching my own reflection on the dark screen. Then I shut down my terminal, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the lift. The Eastwell Underworks sat behind the visible hub, tucked between freight yards and a string of old warehouses. Most commuters never saw this side. Their world ended at the public gates and restarted at arrival. I took a maintenance tram that smelled like old brakes and cheap cleaner. The driver did not ask why a bureau officer wanted the back route. My badge on my chest answered more questions than it raised. The service entrance was a steel roll-up door cut into a wall of stained concrete. A man in a thermal reclamation coverall leaned there, smoking and pretending not to be nervous. When he spotted me, he crushed the butt under his boot and keyed the door. "You are Bell?" he asked. "Which one?" "The upright one." He snorted. "Your brother is waiting, come on." The corridor beyond was low and cramped, walls lined with thick conduits and auxiliary pipes. It sloped downward in a slow grade, the temperature rising with each turn. Some machines somewhere were working very hard to move heat out of sight. We passed a series of heavy doors labelled with simple stenciled terms: heat exchange, ash handling, emergency dump. The further we went, the fewer people we saw. We stopped at a security door with a reader plate. My escort tapped his wristband. Nothing happened. He grimaced. "Ryan has the higher key on him," he said. "I will fetch him. Wait here." He jogged back the way we had come, leaving me alone with the door and the faint vibration coming through the floor plates. It was not a sound so much as a steady pressure, like someone drumming fingers in the bones of the building. After a minute, footsteps approached from the other side. The door slid open. Ryan filled most of the frame. He had put on more muscle since the last time we shared a drink. His coverall hung open at the collar, snapped shut again around a harness of tools. There was a new burn mark on his neck, an irregular patch of shiny skin that climbed up toward his jaw. "Nice to see you in my world for once," he said. "You signed off on my jump," I said. "Thought I should return the favor." He jerked his head inward. "Then come in and stop looking like you are about to arrest me." I stepped through. The space beyond did not look anything like the clean brochure images of the grid. It was a long corridor with a grated floor and thick support beams. On one side, a row of squat metal hulks sat under the path of the pods above, each with its own inspection hatch and maintenance panel. Heat rolled off them in waves. On the far side, a trench ran parallel to the corridor. It was lined with composite slabs gone dark from use. Every few paces, a chute fed into it from above, each one marked with a simple number and a symbol that meant nothing to commuters, but everything to the men who kept this place from cooking the city. "What is this?" I asked. "Burn channels. Each one sits under a cluster of pods. When the pods fire, waste matter drops down and gets turned into heat. That heat runs the exchangers, which feed the local grid. You like your lights, you like your trams, you like those hot showers you take on the bureau floor? This is where a good piece of that comfort starts. Waste matter, clean term, easy term." "What kind of waste?" He did not answer right away. He walked to the nearest inspection hatch and rapped his knuckles on it. "You know how the bureau talks about transit. You step into a pod, your body rides the stream, comes out the other end. Continuity, whole cloth. That is the line," I said. "Right. That is the story they let you tell." He bent and swung the hatch open. A burst of heat hit my face like opening an oven door, only more focused. "What they tell us down here is different." He gestured inside. I stepped closer. The chamber beyond was a vertical shaft, maybe 3 men tall, lined with heat shielding. A round opening in the ceiling marked where the pod floor should be. Another, wider opening in the base led to the trench outside. The sides of the shaft were stained a dull red. "When the pod cycles," Ryan said, "it scans whatever is on its plate. That scan goes to the arrival hub. At the same instant, the plate opens and whatever was standing there drops into this shaft. We are told it is residual substrate. Extra. A copy of tissue, a shell left behind when the real you is transferred." He watched my face. "And you believe that?" "I believe there is something standing on that plate before it falls. You tell me what else it could be." He reached into the hatch and flipped a small switch. A panel on the wall lit up, showing a camera feed labeled Base View A. The image came from inside the shaft, looking up. In it, the round mouth of the pod floor waited. Empty now. Past it you could see a circle of metal, and beyond that a faint hint of the hall above. "You want to see what dropped into my channel during your big performance?" he asked. I could have said no. I did not. Yes. He keyed in a time code. The feed jumped. A man stood in the pod above, seen from below as only the outline of legs and boots. Even from that angle, I knew the shape of the shoes. I recognized the scuff on one toe. The pod cycle began. A faint shimmer moved across the frame, like heat lying over a road. The man's outline blurred. Then the floor under his feet split in 4 pieces and peeled aside. His body fell. He did not flail. He simply tipped forward and dropped straight down, arms at his sides, head back, eyes closed. As he fell, intense orange light filled the lower part of the frame. By the time he reached it, the light was all you could see. "Stop," I said. Ryan did. "That is just calibration imagery," I said, out of reflex. "You could have patched that in from anywhere." He stared at me. "That is your leg. That is your boot." I pulled the clip myself from the camera under the pod. "You think I have the time to fake recordings just to ruin your day?" "There was a thermal spike," I said. "There is a thermal spike every time someone drops in. That is the point. That is the heat we recapture. The only reason yours got special treatment was because comms wanted to lock the footage down before someone did what we are doing now." He tapped the console again, closing the feed. "Them calling it waste does not change what it is." He shut the hatch with a solid clang. "The pods do not move the bodies, Walter. They copy them. The originals fall. We burn them. That is my job." He leaned back against the unit. "So yes, I signed off on your spike. They told me it was a calibration test, that the Bureau had it under control. I kept the real clip on a private drive and tried very hard not to think about whose legs those were." My heart did something unpleasant in my chest. I gripped the railing beside me to keep my hands still. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. Long enough to know what happens to men who know too much about this. Long enough to see a couple of my co-workers reassigned to correction pods and come back with that blank, shiny look in their eyes, like someone had taken a scrub brush to the inside of their skulls." He looked down the line of burn channels, where faint heat ripples moved over the trench. "You came here because something broke through your wipe. Because you remember being in the fire. That means the wash on your pod was weak or late. That means others will slip too. Eastwell is already seeing continuity distress spikes. This is going to get worse. The shaft, the falling body, the way my memory lined up with the camera's view, it all locked together with a small, cold click. The grid has been killing people the whole time," I said. "The grid has been killing originals and sending copies to work. The city runs on the difference. You want to get poetic about it later, be my guest. Right now there is something else you need to see." He pushed off the unit and started down the corridor. I followed. The substrate ward did not exist on any public map. You reached it by taking a maintenance lift down past the labelled levels and then walking through a door that claimed to lead to equipment storage. The corridor beyond had walls the colour of old teeth, and a ceiling so low I could have pressed my palm against it without lifting my arm far. At the end of the corridor, another security door waited. This one had no friendly labels, just a small panel with a slot for a key. Ryan took a tag from inside his coverall and slid it in. "You are sure about this?" I asked. "No, but you work up in ethics. You should meet the men we keep under the floor." The door unlocked with a thick thump. He pulled it open. The ward was a row of rooms on either side of a central hallway. Each room had a window so that the small staff could see inside without going in. Through the glass I saw beds, machines, men. Every bed held a body that had lost a fight with the burn channels. One man's right arm ended at the elbow in a rounded stump, the end covered in grafted skin that did not match the rest of him. Another's legs were encased in molded braces. The metal fused directly into the twisted shapes of his bones. One had a patch over his eye, with the edges of the socket around it shrunk and puckered, as if a tongue of fire had licked straight in and stayed. The smell in there hit me deep and slow. Under the cleaning chemicals and the sharp bite of antiseptic, there was a faint sweetness, the kind that clings to places where meat has burned and been washed away a little too late. Ryan watched my face. "Misfires," he said. "For reasons they never share with us, the burners do not always catch clean. Sometimes the field slips. Sometimes the timing drifts. The body falls, but the fire does not complete the work. The originals live long enough to suffer." "How long?" "Depends. Sometimes hours, sometimes days. We keep them under sedation when we can. Once in a while, one makes it past the first day and starts talking." He stopped in front of a door halfway down. "This one asked for you." I stared at him. "Asked for me." "He saw your name tag when I came down to tighten his restraints." Ryan stepped to the window. "Said he met you once, before the fire." I moved closer. The man inside lay half-propped against pillows. He had once been broad. Now, under the thin hospital blanket, what was left of him seemed folded in on itself. His chest rose and fell under a map of graft lines. His left shoulder was wrong. A thick piece of metal sat partly sunk into the flesh there. The edges fused together like cooled weld. You could still see bolt holes along its length. I realized what it was. A fragment of the chute. His eyes were open. Ryan pushed the door and stepped aside. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "Then security does rounds, and I do not want to explain why an ethics officer is down here." I went in. The machines beside the bed beeped and hissed in slow, regular rhythms. Lines ran from them into the man's arm, delivering clear fluid and painkillers. His skin was a patchwork of colors where grafts had taken and failed and been replaced. "Pavel?" I asked. His gaze crept over to me. "Walter." I had not expected to hear my name said like that ever again. "We met at your plant," I said. The memory came back in a rush. A safety audit, a tour, a smoker's break outside the heat shield where he had told me, half joking, that he trusted the grid more than the old boilers. "You had a bet going about who would hit their commute target for a full month." He coughed out a laugh that turned into a wheeze. "Lost that one." "Why am I here?" I asked. "Because someone finally told you where they put the bodies. I watched you on the feeds. You walked into that pod on camera like a priest. Came out the other side selling faith. Then the burners glitched and I fell sideways instead of all the way in." He lifted his hand a centimeter off the blanket. Scars ran down the back of it in thin tracks. "I woke up here. I have been waking up here every time the drugs wear off. Every time I remember standing in the pod. I remember falling. I remember the fire starting at my feet and moving up. I remember my legs going away. I remember thinking, this is wrong. This is not what they told us. Then I smell myself burning and I black out." "You know what they tell me when I say that?" he asked. "I can guess. That it is a dream. That it is a stress image. That the grid is safe and sometimes the mind hurts itself." He shifted his gaze to the window. "They do not know I saw your badge on my first day here. They do not know I remember you telling us how safe the pods were." "I did not know what they put under them," I said. He smiled, a thin, dry curve. "You do now." He took a breath that seemed to scrape on the way in. "Listen. You cannot fix this for me. They are not going to let someone who lived through the burners back up into the sun. I am a defect. I go out under a sheet, or I go back into the channel when they think the trial is done. That is baked in." He turned back to me. "But there are men walking into pods today who still believe the story on the posters. They think they are riding a beam. They think they will get to work and complain about the aches and go home and hug their kids like it is all one long line. They do not know they are offering up their originals to feed your city." His voice shook for the first time. You have pull. You have access to the feeds, to the boards, to the people who sign off on this. Do something before the next man ends up in my bed." Footsteps sounded in the corridor outside. Ryan's knuckles rapped on the glass. "Time," he called. I stayed 1 moment longer. "I cannot shut the grid down by myself. If it stops suddenly, supply chains snap. People starve. Then do something else. I do not care if you write a sermon or blow up a hub. Just stop pretending you do not know." The door opened fully. A man in a dark uniform stood there. Broad shoulders, lined face, eyes that moved like they were already mapping exits and threats. The badge at his chest read Security Central Grid Authority. The name below, Drax. "Who authorized this visit?" he asked. Ryan stepped in quickly. "Combustion Tech Reclamation Division," he said, tapping his own badge. "I brought in a medical ethics officer to evaluate substrate distress procedures. Director Brand's office is copied on the work order." Drax's gaze slid to my badge, then to my face. He took me in slowly, like a man memorizing a problem. "Caseworker Bell," he said. He knew my name. "We like to know where ethics sticks its nose. Next time, you come through central channels. The ward is not a public attraction." "Understood," I said. His eyes lingered a fraction longer, as if weighing whether to press. Then he shifted his stance. "Rounds start now. You are done here." Ryan caught my sleeve. "We are leaving." We stepped out into the corridor. Drax watched us all the way to the lift. The doors closed. Ryan exhaled once, sharp. "You just picked up a tale you do not want." "I already had one," I said. "Bran knows I remember more than I should. Now security does too." He stabbed at the lift controls, sending us upward. "What are you going to do?" I thought of Pavel's scarred hand lifting that fraction off the bed. "Something." I did not plan a grand strategy. Big plans are for men who have time. I had a head full of fire, a string of faces, and access to a room where the city's memory got scrubbed clean after every jump. The Bureau kept its neural hygiene control suite 2 levels below my office, behind 2 doors that took both badge and palm to open. Most caseworkers never went down there. Our job was dealing with the men who slipped through, not tweaking the wash itself. I had helped draft a guideline once. That was enough to get me clearance. I used it the night after the ward visit. The suite was a long room lined with racks of hardware. Each rack held modules the size of hands, each one marked with a code that tied it to a bank of pods somewhere in the city. Thin lines of light moved along their edges, a slow tide marking the timing of wipes. One man ran the room on the night shift. He sat at a console with his boots up, reading something on a handheld screen. When I pushed the door open, he jolted upright. "Bureau access," he said, eyeing my badge. "Caseworker Bell, is there a problem with the field?" "No problem," I said. "Director Brand wants a cross-check. We have been seeing continuity distress clusters at Eastwell. He wants to rule out misalignment on the wash for Pod Group A." He squinted at me. "Brand sent the continuity man himself to check wiring," he asked. "He wants a narrative he can sell without caveats. If I sign off on it, the feeds will bite." He considered that, then shrugged. "Fine by me. I could use the company. Boards are over there." He gestured toward the racks. "Do not break anything. If the grid sneezes, people start pointing fingers at whoever was in this room last." Noted. He went back to his screen. I made my way down the row, counting modules until I reached the section labeled Eastwell Align. Each module had a simple interface, a dial for wash strength, a timing slider, and a small port where authorized staff could patch in for firmware updates. Under normal operation, both dials were locked behind software limits. My clearance key bypassed them. I slid it into the port. The module's status panel switched from steady to cycling. On the console's monitor, a diagnostic view opened. A bar showed the current field strength and time window, a short block that enveloped the instant of transit and the moments just around it. Anything that happened inside that window vanished from the traveler's experience. They stepped into the pod, remembered the first second of charge, and then found themselves at arrival with only the faint gap they had learned to accept. My hand hovered over the controls. All I had to do was narrow the window, just enough to let a few seconds through, just enough to let men like Pavel keep their last real memory, to see the fire and come out the other side fully awake. Then they would know. Then they could not be told they were imagining it. I thought of the city, of the crowds at Eastwell, of the quiet little lies I had told on doorsteps, in waiting rooms, across case files. I adjusted the slider. Not much. Just enough to let a sliver of the shaft bleed through. The module's status band shifted. The wipe would still happen, but a breath late. The images would have time to mark the mind before the wash swept them. Behind me, the technician yawned. "You almost done?" he asked. "Almost," I said. I saved the new settings and pulled my key. The module's panel steadied. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Minor tweak. Shifted a sync reference. Nothing commuters will notice." He nodded, already returning to his reading. I walked out with my heart doing fast, unpleasant work under my ribs and my palms damp. On the tram home, I rehearsed arguments for what I had done. I was not attacking the grid. I was not sabotaging anything vital. I was giving people back their own experience. I was letting them consent, finally, with eyes open. In the empty dark between stops, those arguments sounded thin. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn. I went back to Eastwell as soon as the morning shifts started. The hub concourse looked the same as it had on the day of my broadcast. Lines of men at the gates, ticket boards rolling through destinations, security at their posts. No one moved any differently. The city had not stopped. I flashed my badge and asked for access to an observation mezzanine above the arrival hall. Gloom met me there. "I heard you were lurking in hygiene last night," he said. "What new burden have you brought me?" "Just tuning. You want these complaints to stop, we have to look at the whole chain." "You are sure you did not break anything?" he asked. "No." It was a true answer if you interpreted the words kindly. He glared at me and stomped off, muttering about bureaucrats. I took a place at the rail. Below, 6 arrival booths sat in a row. Commuters stepped out of them in a steady stream, blinking, adjusting their bags, checking their devices to confirm they were on time. A clerk at a kiosk stamped transit documents. Security watched for contraband and fights. For the first few minutes, nothing seemed different. Then a man staggered. He stepped out of booth 3, took 2 steps and froze in the middle of the floor. His eyes went wide. Both hands flew to his forearms, clutching them as if something were peeling at the skin. "No," he said. "No, no." The men behind him bumped his back. One cursed under his breath and moved to go around. The shaking man lashed out. "Do not touch me," he shouted. "It is still on me. Get it off." He clawed at his own sleeves, tearing the fabric, raking red lines down his arms. Security started toward him. Before they reached him, another man stumbled out of booth 5. He dropped to his knees as soon as his feet hit the station floor. Both hands slammed into the tiles. He gasped, sucking air as if he had just been held in something hot and tight. "It did not stop," he said. "It did not stop. I felt myself go in. I felt my teeth crack." His voice climbed. I burned all the way down." More heads turned. The third came out of booth 1. He made it 2 steps, then spun and slammed both fists into the booth door. "You killed me!" he yelled at the empty pod. "You killed me and printed a fake." 2 guards reached him. He swung wild. One guard took a hit to the jaw and reeled backward. The other drove a baton into the man's ribs. The man folded, gasping, then tried to lunge again. In the space of a breath, the hall went from routine to something else. Commuters backed away, eyes flicking from the shouting men to the pods, to the security response. Some started recording on cheap handsets. Others just stared, waiting to see what flavor of madness this was and whether it carried. Down on the floor, The first man had started banging his forearms against the tiles, as if trying to knock an invisible layer off. "I smell it," he cried. "It is on me. It is inside my clothes." He retched. Nothing came up. A third guard grabbed him from behind, pinning his arms. Another ripped open a sedative kit. I watched, fingers clamped hard around the rail. This is what I had wanted, I reminded myself. For people to see. For the truth to hit them so hard it could not be washed away. It did not feel like a noble act. It felt like I had stood in the upper seats of an arena and pulled a lever that dropped animals onto the sand with their eyes still open. More arrivals stepped out, some blinking, some laughing nervously, some pausing with odd expressions that might have been the start of the same memory and might have been nothing. Not all of them broke. The majority shook off whatever they felt and walked on. The ones who did not become the center of the room. Security dragged two men toward a side door, both half sedated, one still trying to form words around a slack tongue. "You killed me," he kept trying to say. "You killed—" The guards hauled him through the door. It slammed. Up on the mezzanine, a camera mounted in the corner turned and aimed straight at me. I looked up on reflex. A man stood beside it in the shadows, speaking into a throat mic. He wore the same dark uniform I had seen in the ward. When he stepped into the light, I recognized the lined face and the steady eyes. Garrett Drax watched the scene on the floor, then looked at me. He held my gaze for a long second, as if the two of us were the only ones in the hub. Then he touched the side of his headset. "Lock down Eastwell A line," he said. The sound carried up just enough for me to catch the words. "And pull all internal recordings from the last hour for review." The expectation sat in the way he straightened his shoulders. He knew this was not random. He knew someone had put their fingers on his system. The way his eyes stayed on me left very little doubt about who he thought it was. I forced myself to turn away from the rail, as if I were just another official, making a note, nothing more. Inside my chest, something had shifted. I had proof now. My worst guess was real. The grid killed originals, burned them under the pods, and the copies could remember if you gave them room. I also had a head of security who had just watched his arrival hall turn into a demonstration, and who knew my name. I had chosen to stop being the man who reassured people while they walked into the fire. Now I had to live with the way I had lit it. They came for me before I could go home. I was still on the Eastwell mezzanine, trying to decide whether to throw up or laugh or both, when security closed in. 4 men in dark uniforms fanned out, headsets in, batons at their belts. Garrett Drax led them, moving with the kind of controlled walk that never wastes a step. "Caseworker Bell," he said, "you are coming with us." He did not bother with pretense, no mention of routine debrief, no soft language, just a statement of fact. 2 of his men took my arms. I did not fight. My knees felt unsteady anyway. As they marched me away, I looked back down at the arrival hall. The floor had been cleared. The men who had remembered burning were gone, dragged through doors to places like Pavel's ward. The pods waited for the next shift. People were still lining up. You can show them the fire, I thought, and they will still queue if you do not give them any other way to live. Drax pushed me through a staff door and into a freight corridor. "We have camera of you in hygiene last night," he said. "We have records of a field adjustment on Eastwell pods. We have a hall full of commuters screaming about fire under their feet. I do not think this will be a subtle conversation. If you know what happens under the pods, you cannot pretend this is all in their heads," I said. He gave me a thin look. "That is above my pay grade. My job is to keep the grid from tearing itself apart. Today you made that harder." He nodded to his men. They cuffed my wrists behind me and walked me toward a lift marked transfer. Whatever came next, they did not plan to handle it here. The transfer bay sat under a separate wing of the hub, away from public traffic. It was a long room with a double-height ceiling and a single pod at the far end, bigger and more heavily armored than the commuter units upstairs. Correction pods were built to move prisoners and staff under guard, with stronger fields and deeper wipes. Today it waited with its door open, wide enough to swallow a small crowd. Half a dozen men already stood there in shackles, hands linked by a chain. I recognized two of them from Eastwell's arrival hall, faces slack from sedatives. They looked like they wanted to scream and could not remember why. At the edge of the group, shoulders squared, stood Ryan. He had fresh bruises along one cheek, purple blooming through the grime. A strip of plastic cuffed his wrists. His coverall was half unzipped, harness missing. They had taken his tools. "I told you to stay away from my burn channels, Bell," he said when Drax's men brought me in. "Now look at us. Family day at the correction pod." "What charges?" I asked. "Sabotage," Drax said. "Conspiracy to undermine grid operations. Unauthorized access to restricted wards. The usual." "You cannot run the grid without thermal staff," Ryan said. "You start throwing us into correction. The exchanges stall." "We only need a few examples," Drax said. "Most men fall in line if they see what happens to the noisy ones." He signaled for the guards to add me to the chain. Cold metal closed around my wrists. A guard looped the link through my cuffs and clipped it shut. I could move a small step in any direction and no more. At the far end of the bay, a door stood half open, leading to a control room where a bank of panels glowed. I caught a glimpse of racks, tight rows of hardware studded with small status lights. Identity boards, probably, for tuning correction profiles. If there was any place to attack the system from, it was in there. Drax strode to a console near the pod and keyed in some sequence. The pod floor plate vibrated under our feet. The walls around the bay shuddered once as the big unit woke. "Next stop, correction facility," he said. "There they will scrape off whatever you think you know and send you back as something more cooperative. Or not at all." He turned toward the control room door. "We will need to tighten the wipe profiles on this batch," he said to one of the techs inside. "Cases like theirs need—" A man in the chain beside me flinched. He was one of the Eastwell screamers, eyes still glassy, jaw slack. Something in Drax's words must have poked a raw nerve. He jerked sideways, wrenching at the cuffs. The chain snapped taut. A guard stumbled. Before he could recover, the man drove his shoulder into the guard's gut. The guard doubled over. The man lunged again, wild, dragging the rest of us off balance. Another guard reached for his baton. Ryan moved first. He shifted his weight and slammed his shoulder into the unprepared guard at his side. The man's feet went out from under him. His baton skidded across the floor. "Down!" Ryan snapped. Instinct made me drop my weight. The chain swung, bodies tangling, turning the line of prisoners into a flailing barrier. Drax swore and reached for his holster. A baton caught him across the wrist. His gun clattered away. The bay detonated into motion. Guards shouted. The nervous techs at the consoles scrambled back, knocking over stools. One alarm after another began to sound, a rising ladder of tones that all meant the same thing: loss of control. In the chaos, Ryan twisted his hands, angling his cuffs toward me. I shoved my bound wrists toward his. He hooked his wrists through the chain and jerked hard. The cheap link between our cuffs snapped. We were still attached to the others, but now a section was loose. "Kick left," he said. We both drove our boots into the shin of the nearest guard. He went down. The man who started the fight staggered forward, pulling the rest of the line with him toward the pod. A warning light above the pod door flashed from standby to armed. A recorded voice droned over the alarms, calling out some sequence about emergency routing, automatic cycle. The system had seen a threat in the transfer bay and decided the solution was to move its problems elsewhere as quickly as possible. "Automatic launch," Ryan said. "They must have tied it to a security trigger. Once the door closes—" "We are gone," I said. Gone to correction. Gone to a deeper wipe. Gone to a place where I would never again be able to say with a straight face that I knew anything. Unless. The open control room door gaped less than 10 strides away. Inside, the racks glowed. Each unit probably held the wipe profile for a person, a pod, a line. A clever system would handle the heavy work centrally, and send timing orders out along the grid to the pods. I wrenched at the broken link around my wrists. "Ryan, those boards, can you find mine?" He saw where I was looking, and I watched comprehension land like a blow. "You really want to step into that pod again?" "I want someone on the other side who remembers," I said. "Not just images, the whole thing. I want a version of me who goes through their correction pod, comes out and can say what happened in there in detail with proof. They can erase the man in this bay. They cannot stop the next one from arriving. Assuming the next one is you. Assuming the copies think they are the originals." He looked back at the pod. A guard lunged for him. Ryan ducked and swung the chain like a flail. It cracked against the man's temple. The guard went down. "If we can tie your wipe profile into the audit feed," he said, "the system will record every second of your transit as evidence. That feed goes straight to Central Ethics. Their own logs will betray them." He turned to me. "You will have to die on purpose. No sedatives, no missed moments. You will feel all of it." I thought of Pavel, repeating his final seconds alone in that bed. Rory fighting to tear his node out of the wall rather than be dragged back to the pod. "I already did it once by accident," I said. "Better I choose it this time." We did not have time to argue. "Then move," Ryan said. He grabbed the chain between us and yanked. It slipped over a guard's boot and around a support beam. He looped it twice and jerked hard, pinning the rest of the shackled men in place. They cursed and struggled, but the beam held them just long enough to block the guard's advance. "Do not let them take you quiet," Ryan called to them. "Make them work for it." He drove his shoulder into my back, shoving me toward the control room. We crossed the open floor in a ragged sprint. Drax saw us and lunged, but one of the panicked prisoners crashed into his legs, bringing him down. We dove through the control room door and slammed it. Ryan shot the manual bolt. On the other side, fists pounded. Someone hit the panel with a baton, denting the metal. "Find your board," I said. He turned to the racks. The boards were arranged in long, neat columns, each unit marked with a pod cluster and a short code. Toward the middle, another row carried individual names. High-risk profiles, staff with access, men they wanted extra control over. Our names were there. "I do not like being on this list," he said. He yanked my module from its slot. The unit was the size of my hand, warm from constant use. My name and bureau ID were etched on one edge. "Hold it," he said. I gripped it, feeling the faint vibration inside like a trapped insect. He moved to a main junction at the end of the rack and pulled open a panel. Thick bundles of cable lined the cavity, along with a row of simple mechanical switches. Each switch tied one group of boards to a different recorder, one for internal audits, one for central ethics, one for training sims. "This one feeds the audit record," he said, touching the far switch. "If we tie you into that, your next transit will write straight over their old calibration footage. Every ethics console in the city will get a copy." "How do you tie me in?" I asked. "Like this." He jammed my module into an empty slot beside the junction, then stripped a lead from the audit bus and snapped it into the module's side port. The movement was quick and angry, like a man jamming a weapon into a holster he hated. "You will get no wipe," he said. "Not even the small gap they usually give you. Everything from the first charge to arrival will stay. If you can stay conscious through the fire, the recorder will catch it." The pounding on the door intensified. Metal began to buckle inward under blows. The pod out in the bay kept cycling up, its startup whine growing higher. "Incoming correction sequence in 1 minute," a mechanical voice called from a speaker near the ceiling. "All transfer subjects prepare for transit." "They're going to send that pod whether we like it or not," I said. "Then we ride it," Ryan said. His eyes met mine. "I should go. You already burned once. I have not paid that price yet. If you go, you leave me here tied to this room with a module in my hand and no way to finish the job if they shoot you. You always did hate being the one left behind," he said. He shoved the module back into my hand. "Then you go. I will keep them off you as long as I can. Once you drop, whatever comes out at the correction facility will have their teeth in the system and your memories in their head. He pulled a sharpened ceramic shim from the lining of his boot. The guards had missed it during the pat-down. He cut through the leftover length of chain between my cuffs and the rest of the line, then sliced my wrist restraints. The cuffs fell away, clattering on the floor. "Do not waste this," he said. I closed my fingers around the module. Pavel's face floated up in my mind. Rory's voice. The men who had staggered out of Eastwell's pods, gripping their arms like they could still feel the heat. "I will not." Something crashed into the door hard enough to bow it inward. A strip of light appeared at the edge. Ryan grabbed a wrench off a nearby console and positioned himself beside the door. "When it opens," he said, "run for the pod. Do not look back. Do not wait for me." He hefted the wrench once, testing the weight. "Walter." I stopped in the doorway that led back to the bay. "If you come out the other side, tell them we did not go quiet." The door exploded inward. The first guard through caught the wrench across the mouth, teeth scattered. He went down without a sound. The second tried to push past him. Ryan drove his shoulder into the man's midsection, and they crashed against the frame. Battens came up behind them. Someone fired a pistol. The shot went wide, punching a hole in a coolant line above the control rack. A hot white spray blasted out. Chemical vapor filled the room in a rushing white wave, blinding us and clawing at the lungs. I threw an arm over my face and ran. The bay beyond was chaos. The shackled men at the beam thrashed and shouted. Guards struggled to keep their footing on the wet floor. The correction pod's doors stood open, interior lit, waiting. The warning voice had started counting down in a flat, uncaring tone. I sprinted. Behind me, through the hiss of the vapor, I heard Ryan roar once, a raw sound cut off mid-word. I did not look back. I reached the pod and hurled myself inside. The floor plate shivered under my weight. The door began to close. A hand grabbed the rim. Drax. His face was streaked with moisture. One side glistened an angry red where the coolant spray had caught him. He held onto the pod door with one hand, pistol in the other. "You do not know what you are doing," he said. He aimed for my chest. The pod door finished its cycle. The edge slammed into his wrist. The gun fired wild, the door sealed. The world shrank to the pod interior. This unit was larger than a commuter box, meant to hold several men under guard, but right now I was alone. A ring of anchors ran along the walls for shackles. A built-in harness dangled from the ceiling, unused. In front of me, a status panel showed my profile. They had already loaded my correction settings. Wipe depth maximal, personality dampening high, subject Bell Walter. They planned to scrub me down to bone. I looked at my hand. The amnesia module sat there, small and warm, tied into an audit feed that would carry whatever happened next out into the world. "Begin transit," I said. The pod obeyed. Heat built around me. The charge crawled under my skin in a way I recognized now, not as a neutral field, but as claws getting ready to strip something off. There was no mist. They wanted this one clean and brutal. The floor dropped. The shaft yawned beneath me. Light. Fire. The same perspective from Eastwell, only sharper now, edges cut with a knife. I saw the round mouth of the pod floor above, the walls of the shaft narrowing, the long, bright channel at the bottom waiting. I fell. This time my body was not limp. I felt every joint as it shifted, every small twist as gravity took over. The fire reached up. The first contact came at my ankles, a bite of heat so intense it turned everything else vague. Skin tightened, then split. Bone flashed into awareness, then pain smothered it. It climbed. Calves, knees, thighs. By the time it hit my waist, I could not tell where my body ended. The fire filled all the room inside me where thoughts used to be. Every nerve reported in at once, screaming the same single fact. You are burning. I tried to hold on to one clear idea. Remember this. Remember it so well that no man can ever talk you out of it. The fire took my chest. Breath vanished. The air in my lungs turned against me. For an instant I was sure my ribs had cracked open and flared like kindling. My right hand, which I had seen burn once already in memory, went again. I watched the fingers lose their shape, skin tightening, then running, claiming the bones beneath. There was a moment, somewhere between falling and stopping, when everything went white. Not absence, but a blinding crush of sensation. The kind of white that comes when all other colors have been burned away. Then, the fire was gone. I was standing, solid floor under my boots, cool air on my face, a different pod door in front of me, painted a different color, voices outside, an arrival chime. Every inch of me shuddered. My skin felt intact, but my nerves still reported pain in a ghostly way, like echoes from a damaged room. I lifted my right hand, whole, unmarked. My mind knew better. The pod door slid open. 2 guards waited with restraints ready, expecting a docile, empty-eyed man whose worst edges had been ground down. I stepped out and looked one of them square in the face. "Turn on your monitors," I said. "You are about to see what your machine really does." He frowned, thrown off. Behind him, mounted on the wall above the arrival booths, a set of display screens flashed from idle patterns to a new feed. Somewhere in the facility, an automated system had just received a fresh audit record and pushed it to every ethics console on the grid. It was the clip from my head. Not the clean calibration imagery they used to soothe themselves, the real one: shaft, pod floor, falling man, channel of fire. The view from under the world as body after body dropped into it. My body. The nearest screen showed the shaft from the camera's angle, while in the corner, a small inset displayed my biometric readout. Pulse spiking, brain activity pegged, pain levels off every scale the system had built. The guards froze. On another screen, a different feed opened. Security footage from Eastwell's burn channels. A close-up of Pavel's bed. Rory's record from the ward. The system had pulled every flagged anomaly tied to my profile and poured them all into one brutal chain. Ethics consoles in towers across the city would be showing the same thing. "You cannot be here," one guard said. He reached for his baton. I moved first. I drove my shoulder into his chest, knocked him backward, and sprinted for the nearest console. Alarms began to ring, but I already knew those voices. I ignored them. The console sat on a waist-high stand, screen tilted. I slid my badge across its reader. "Access request denied," the system announced. "Profile status, correction subject." Of course. I jammed the amnesia module into an open maintenance slot under the screen. Identity conflict flashed. Walter Bell logged as subject and auditor. That small confusion made it slow. "Override," I said. "Ethics priority, broadcast audit feed to public emergency channels." The console stuttered. Far above me, somewhere across the city, sirens would be sounding for other reasons now. Emergency feeds, the ones used for disaster warnings and structural failures, shared infrastructure with ethics alarms. If you screamed loud enough in one, it bled into the other. The console accepted my command. On the screen, the fire jumped to a live city map. Nodes lit up, each one a hub with arrivals. Marks spread as feeds replicated. The noise level in the facility rose as men in different rooms started shouting, pointing at screens, demanding answers. Someone grabbed me from behind and slammed me face first into the console. Pain burst in my nose. I felt a hot trickle down my upper lip. The guard wrenched my arms back and snapped cuffs on them. "You just bought yourself a deeper hole," he said. He dragged me away from the console. On the screens throughout the hall, the same clip looped. Body after body dropping through the pod floor into a channel of fire. Eyes closed, hands at their sides. No way to brace. The guard shoved me into a cell. I did not fight. He slammed the door and stormed off, barking orders into his headset. I lay on the narrow bunk and listened. First came the raised voices, then the doors slamming, then the distant roar that meant a lot of men were not content to let the facility's staff do all the deciding. The details of the next hours blur in my memory. Smoke somewhere in the building, emergency lights switching to a dull red glow, the thump of boots running past my door. Someone unlocked my cell halfway through and hauled me into a holding area with other prisoners, then changed their mind and shoved us somewhere else when they realized we were correction subjects and not staff. By the time the noise settled, the world outside was different. The grid's secret had been dragged into daylight, and no amount of spin would cram it back into the shaft. Months later, the city still runs, not the same way. I live now in a small apartment above a bus yard, in a part of town that used to be an afterthought and has become important again. The buses are big, ugly machines built from old freight haulers and whatever the mechanics can scavenge. They run on the power that used to go solely into the pods. From my front window, I can see the edge of an old hub. Half of it is gone. The top levels were decommissioned after the feeds. Men with cutting torches went at the higher structures, melting them down for scrap. The central tower still stands, but the pod arrays are empty. No one wanted to ride those lines anymore, even after they added warnings. The authority shifted as many routes as they could to ground. They could not shut down the grid completely. That would have snapped too many chains at once. Food, medicine, spare parts for the places that cannot be reached in time by road. Some jumps stayed. They look different now. Every departure booth has a new plaque on its door. The wording went through committee and came out unexpectedly blunt. Transit notice. Step into this pod and your original body will be destroyed under this station. A copy of you will arrive at your destination. By entering, you accept this. When those words rolled out, feeds filled with arguments. Philosophers, preachers, union men, grid executives. They shouted about identity and continuity and what it meant to be the same person. I watched a few debates from my sofa, then switched them off. For me, the question of sameness is not theoretical anymore. I remember 2 falls, 2 fires, 2 arrivals. I remember Ryan in the control room, silhouette half lost in steam, wrench in his hand. I never saw his body again. Official reports list him as missing in an accident during suppression of a transfer bay disturbance. Unrecovered. Convenient. Pavel's name surfaced in one internal inquiry. Substrate subject, anomalous survivability, terminated during facility downsizing. That is how they phrase a man's last days when they want him to fit on a line. Bran resigned under pressure. I have not seen him since. Some say he took a private line out of the city before the new warnings went up. If so, somewhere under some other hub, a body with his name tag on it dropped into a channel of fire. Maybe he knew. Maybe he did not care. I went through my own inquiry, of course. The grid authority tried to paint me as a rogue caseworker who manipulated evidence and incited unrest. It worked for some. Men like simple villains. But too many eyes had seen the feeds, and too many technicians had come forward after that with stories of misfires and wards and suppression orders. In the end, they cut a compromise. I was not sent back to correction. I was also barred from working anywhere near the grid ever again. So I sit in my small apartment, contract out as a safety consultant for ground transit, and watch buses instead of pods. On good days, I can almost pretend that is enough. On bad days, I wake up with the memory of the fire still wrapped around my legs. I put my feet on the floor and remind myself that these ones have never actually burned. That I am a copy of a man who died in a shaft under a hub, walking around with his memories like a second skin. It does not feel less real for that. This morning I lean on my window frame and watch the scene below. The bus yard is already busy. Men in coveralls check tire bolts, run fuel lines, argue over loading charts. A pair of dispatchers lean over a paper map, tracing routes with their fingers. Ground transit is slow and clumsy and subject to traffic jams and bad weather. It is also honest. Everyone on those buses knows they are still carrying the same inconvenient bodies from one place to another. Beyond the yard, at the far edge of my view, sits the last active pod in this district. They kept it because the hospitals fought for it. There are emergencies when an extra hour means lives. So the city made a deal. 1 pod per district. for medical use and critical freight, and anyone who is still willing to ride. A man stands in front of it now. He wears a work jacket and a satchel strapped across his chest. His build says factory or dock, someone used to lifting more than his own weight. He stands just shy of the door, staring at the plaque. From up here I cannot see his face, only the set of his shoulders. He reaches out and lays his palm flat against the words. He stands like that for a few breaths, reads it once, twice. Maybe he pictures a shaft under his feet, a channel of fire, a body with his face on it dropping away. He could walk away. He could turn and head for the bus stop, join the line of men who have decided that even if the copy is them, they do not want to feed their originals into the grid. He does not. He lifts his hand from the plaque and grips the door handle. For a moment he just holds it, knuckles whitening, as if testing the weight of what he is about to do. Then he pulls the door open and steps inside. The pod closes behind him. I watch because I know exactly what happens next, in the space that will never show on the hospital's intake logs. I know what burns and what survives, and what comes out the other side thinking it is the same man who went in. I watch until the arrival board at the hospital hub across town ticks over, showing one more incoming patient arrival by grid. Then I step back from the window. The world did not stop when I dragged the truth into the open. It rarely does. Men still make trades with systems that hurt them, because the alternatives hurt differently. But at least now when they lay their hands on those pod doors, they are doing it with their eyes open.